So right now, everyone is on the edge of their seats hoping that Battlefield 6 doesn't turn into a huge stinking
big pile of shit.
But fortunately, most of the devs that were working at the time of Battlefield 5 are now out the door, and Chief Executive Studios Officer Chief EA Steve Why is it so hard to say? EA Chief Studios Officer Laura Mill described this as a love letter to our fans.
Got my pre-order ticket here waiting on the train. Oh God, are you jumping on the hype train? Yeah, I'm jumping on the hype train.
But today we're going to go over several things that we think EA DICE should and shouldn't do in order to give this game its much needed Warzone-sized revival in order to restore it to its former glory. So first off, EA, look at me, look at me, look at me. Get the trailer right on this. Get the trailer right. Battlefield 5 had the most tone deaf, the most random, the most unfocused trailer we've ever seen. As it stands today on YouTube, the trailer now has 359,000 likes versus 570,000 dislikes. They were trying so hard to emulate the chaos and run and gun shooting style of COD games when that's not really why we play Battlefield. DICE, if we want to play COD, we'll just play COD. And then the massive PR debacle, nightmare, disaster, whatever you want to call it, that resulted in women on the front lines donning robotic arms and an almost cartoonish series of events that just tried to fake those only in Battlefield moments that we all love from 3 and 4. The reason that we love those only in Battlefield moments is because they're not scripted, and you can't just simply reproduce them in some trailer. Make an awesome trailer that doesn't try so freaking hard. And also, don't inject social justice warrior politics in your games if you don't want the controversy that led to developers attacking their own customer base by calling them uneducated and telling them not to buy the game. We've been waiting months for a new Battlefield game, and there's a reason that 3 and 4 were so successful. Follow that formula, improve on it, and innovate, and we'll play it. And these next two I'm going to lump together because I think that they go hand in hand and they're so important, and that is an anti-cheat and no skill-based matchmaking, because let's face it, tons of us turned to Warzone as Battlefield 5 dropped the ball, and as fun as Warzone really is, DICE has a perfect opportunity to target the players of Warzone that Activision has completely ignored, that have constantly demanded an anti-cheat and a ranked game mode, or at least a server browser. If I were EA right now, I'd be gearing up every single trailer possible showcasing just how aggravating Warzone is for you to constantly be dealing with cheaters and then being punished on top of that with sweatier lobbies just for improving your skill. As a matter of fact, I made one of these right here. Check it out.
What are you doing?
I'm loving skill-based matchmaking.
Fuck!
Come on, come on. You can do that. You got a anti-cheat campaign. EA, I'll send you a address on where to send the check. A modern setting. Now, all indicators lean towards a modern setting right now, but I can only imagine developers sweating over all this hype as they're about to unveil Battlefield 6 American Revolution. Which, yeah, okay, I would play that. But not many would. Anyways, there's nowhere else to go now except for modern or futuristic. They've done World War II, they've done World War I, and with all the COD failures with wall running super soldiers and jetpacks, I just don't think I can take a futuristic game seriously anymore. Now don't get me wrong, sure it can be in the future without being quote-unquote futuristic. This gives the devs a little room for creativity with gadgets and guns and vehicles without going over the top and being corny. Now they did 2142 was actually a pretty decent game. It wasn't that corny for whatever reasons compared to, Call of Duty, but we did see this in Battlefield 4 too. That was a more modern setting. It released in 2013 and it was set 7 years in the future for 2020, so we got to have motion detectors, target detectors on our rifles, remote control mortars, and futuristic countermeasures for tanks, so on and so forth, and it was done right. With a modern setting, you can take a few liberties here and there to innovate and even include your minority female characters for skins that absolutely nobody cares about except for you because your player base is 98% male anyways. But hey, whatever makes you feel warm and fuzzy, as long as it doesn't impact the gameplay, we're okay. Vehicle gameplay. Yeah, sure, Battlefield 1 had some really interesting takes on tank and air gameplay, but hands down, guys, Battlefield 4 was that one game that if you put in the time, there was a huge enough skill ceiling for your investment to pay you back. And fine, you know what, maybe some freak hops into a helicopter and goes 63-2 for the entire match, but you know what, that guy earned that. And as long as there's a decent anti-cheat, I don't really care. The balance of Battlefield 4 vehicles, while not 100% perfect, as no game is, it really was the best I think we've seen in the Battlefield franchise. And it was because of that high skill ceiling. If you sucked in a tank, it really wasn't OP. If you were a god in a tank, you could be an efficient killing machine for the entire match, especially if the enemy team failed to coalesce and provide an offensive front against you. And for those that are just railing against the fact that a tank is OP, well, yeah, it's a tank. It's supposed to be OP. It's a freaking tank. So allow them to be scary on the battlefield. Allow them to instill fear in your enemy, but also allow it to be taken down if enough people coalesce and provide a good front against that tank. So EA, don't solely rely just on the mechanics though to balance out the vehicles versus infantry gameplay. That high skill ceiling that we saw in Battlefield 4 was more than enough to really naturally take care of that. And next, they need to at least try to match the atmosphere of Battlefield 1. I'm honestly not sure how they would pull this off with a modern setting, but if they could somehow look back to Battlefield 1 and replicate the feel of that game in relation to its time period, it would make Battlefield 6 truly amazing. Now, I do feel that Call of Duty 2019 Modern Warfare may have scratched the surface on this, but it is a tall order, and we are going to talk a few more things about how to make the game more immersive and have more atmosphere, but Battlefield 1 does have some pretty big shoes to fill. Next, movement. Now, if you can take Battlefield 5's movement and improve upon it, I think you're going in the right direction. If there was one thing that Battlefield 5 did to actually bring the franchise forward, it was bringing that movement into the modern era, because Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 1 are extremely dated when it comes to this. If you hop back into a game for Battlefield 4 or 1, it feels extremely clunky, especially if you've been playing Apex or COD or any of the modern day shooters. They are dated. But I do believe that Battlefield 5's movement can go a long way to helping out Battlefield 6. Sound design. Now, this is another place where if you want to match the atmosphere of Battlefield 1, you have got to pump your game into sound design. There was no rival in this world to putting on a set of headphones, creaking open the door of a tank, firing up that 120-year-old diesel engine, and just the sound of the treads rolling across the ground, the exhaust, the sound of the engine straining to make it up the side of a mountain, and even stuff with infantry, like fellow soldiers shouting out orders and requests in their own language, was deeply immersive, and it made you feel like you were in the battle. If there was one way to make a game immersive, it'd be bringing the sound design up to the level of Battlefield 1's. Customization. Now, Battlefield 4 did a pretty decent job with this, especially for the time that it was introduced. And then we saw Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5 kind of drop the ball on it. Now, arguably, yes, World War I and World War II guns are going to be a little bit harder to modify, as back then there weren't modifications for them. But if EA wants to improve on this, they should really take note from Infinity Ward and the gunsmith system. And now if we're hopefully moving into the modern setting, they can take advantage of this. In most Battlefield games, it kind of went like this. You know, you improve your weapon for its designed usage, and you would change weapons based on how that weapon performed. But with Modern Warfare, you could change up a majority of weapons to perform at many different ranges, for close quarters, for long range, for high damage output, but many different situations. And plus, having all of this customization quite literally adds hours upon hours of tangible gameplay, trying out different combinations, pairing different weapons together for specific loadouts. And you know, Battlefield 4 did this to an extent, but in the 8 years since then, Call of Duty has really taken the reins of customization and nearly perfected them. EA must take note of this, and they must capitalize on it. And the next one is going to be kind of controversial among Battlefield players, but if Battlefield really wants to win some fans back from Call of Duty, they're going to have to introduce a free-to-play Battle Royale. Now, Personally, I'd almost rather it not be a free-to-play game because of all the hackers and the ability to set up an infinite number of accounts, but unfortunately, Activision has kind of turned that into the industry standard, at least for right now, I think. But EA is going to have to do this right. Their inventory system is going to have to mimic Warzone's. They can't have the same cumbersome, intrusive style inventory system like Firestorm introduced, because when it comes down to it, we don't want to play an inventory management game. We want to play Battlefield. This is part of why Warzone really was that successful, but luckily EA does have a cheat sheet from Activision they can just copy off of, and hopefully even improve. Hopefully they'll also take note from the loadout system as well, and that allows skill and knowledge of the game to also factor in instead of just random loot pickups. When it comes to copying the success of your competitor, do it. But just remember, if that's all you do, you're always going to be a step behind them, and we all know the factors that made Warzone successful, and that needs to be replicated and added to. It's also obvious why Warzone is currently failing in so many aspects right now, so there's really no excuse for DICE to get this wrong this time. The path to success has been completely laid out for them. And lastly, marketing. Now, this should be a no-brainer, but since Battlefield 5 screwed up on this so freaking bad, we do need to touch on this. First off, don't tell your fan base not to buy the game. Right, Patrick?
That makes sense to me.
No, not that Patrick. This Patrick. Pretty obvious, but not so much to Mr. Soderlund, so just wanted to touch on that. Because many fans took his advice, including me. It was over a year after this nightmare PR campaign before I even bought it. And I wanted to. Also, let me tell you, it's fine to have women in your games. Literally, nobody cares. Unless it works counterintuitively to the narrative of the game, such as it did with Battlefield 5. But since we think this is going to be a modern setting, you can include them and nobody's going to care. But don't inject the campaign with Mary Sues that are simply amazing just because they're women. Now, arguably, in my opinion, I do think that Battlefield 5 actually did a decent job of this in the campaign. Not the trailer, not in the PR, not in the marketing, but in the campaign. But from the way EA handled the public relations standpoint to this, they completely shat the bed on them. They called their player base uneducated, attacked them for not being woke enough, and thank God that Soderlund is miles away from this next installment, but I still want to know if EA devs are really okay with players who don't line up with them politically. Just before I buy the game, I would like to ask that. Is that okay? Is that okay, EA, for me not to buy your game if I'm not some social justice warrior that rages over every single perceived instance of lack of diversity or transgender minority representation at every freaking opportunity? As a general rule of thumb, if you did it in Battlefield 5, don't do it here. Maybe that would be a good failsafe for you not to make a shit game again. But I am somewhat relieved to see the amount of focus being put on this new game, with multiple departments working on this, them describing this next installment as a love letter to our fans, which is exactly what this franchise is in desperate need of. Because I honestly don't think that the Battlefield franchise can take another flop without EA being forced to shelve it for another decade. This time counts, and it seems as though EA is aware of this, and I definitely hope so. I, along with thousands of other Warzone fans and former Battlefield friends, are just waiting for real solid Battlefield gameplay, a real solid Battlefield experience to contend with Activision. And hopefully with Battlefield coming back to be a contender, we'll see more competition among the AAA game developers, because if EA comes back and doesn't completely screw up, it will force Activision to listen to what their fans want instead of just releasing new broken content once a month and the next ridiculously overpowered meta weapon. Competition is a good thing, and that's what I'm looking forward to when Battlefield returns to the scene. So, ultimately, I want to know, what do you think? What does Battlefield need to capitalize on in order to compete with the other AAA titles of 2021? And which out of this list do you think is most important for Battlefield to come back hard on the scene and declare itself a real viable competitor to Activision? Anyways, guys, thank you for your time. Leave a like, leave a comment, and definitely subscribe to the channel if you want to support your favorite All-American gamer. Once again, my name's Hitchagood, and tell me your thoughts on what Battlefield needs to do in order to come back to the scene in an awesome fashion. You guys have a great day. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.